Your silence isn't just a limit you set, it's more like a wrecking ball tearing through a house of cards that was never really stable to begin with. When you stop reacting, you're not just stepping away, you're quietly cutting off a predator's air supply. Most people assume that walking away brings instant relief. But what actually unfolds after you go quiet is a full-blown psychological storm. Today, we're going to walk through the 7 exact stages of narcissistic collapse that happen once you finally shut off the supply for good. Think back to all the chaos you lived through, every fight, every dizzying circular conversation, every moment you felt like you were losing your grip on reality. None of it was random. It was all built to keep you hooked so you'd keep feeding them your energy. But the second you let go of the rope, everything changes. Let's take a close look at what happens inside their head once the mirror cracks and the applause finally dies down. A narcissist's whole psychological setup rests on a fragile, empty, fake self that needs constant outside approval, often called narcissistic supply, just to keep functioning. Unlike someone with real security, whose confidence comes from within through self-awareness, personal values, and genuine self-worth, a narcissist depends completely on the praise, admiration, and reactions of others to hold their identity together. Picture a huge, impressive skyscraper that looks stunning from the street. But once you look closer, you notice it has no steel beams and no real foundation underneath. It's just an elaborate hollow shell propped up by temporary scaffolding. That scaffolding is the nonstop flow of attention, flattery, and emotional reaction they pull from the people around them. Because this emptiness inside feels terrifyingly real to them, they carry a constant, low-level fear of being exposed. It's a deep dread that underneath all the performance, they're actually inadequate, unlovable, or broken in some fundamental way. To shield themselves from that unbearable shame, they put on a show of perfection, superiority, and untouchable confidence. But this defense is naturally shaky because that false self can't create its own fuel. It behaves like an emotional black hole, always demanding fresh doses of validation from partners, friends, family, and coworkers. The moment that supply dries up, their whole internal structure starts to shake. Without people around to reflect back an image of greatness, the narcissist is left completely alone with a deeply cracked sense of self. And this pushes them to manipulate, control, and provoke others nonstop just to keep their own mind from going dark. Once you understand this core weakness, everything starts to look different. Their constant need for control was never really about you. It was a desperate, frantic effort to stop their own house of cards from caving in. Once the initial shock fades and the narcissist realizes your silence isn't a temporary phase, but a real solid boundary, things shift into a stage of heavier manipulation and constant testing. Because your calm, non-reactive state is starving them of the supply they need, their survival instincts kick into high gear. They don't see your distance as you choosing peace for yourself. They see it as a direct challenge to their control, and they respond by pulling out every trick in their manipulation playbook. The gaslighting gets louder, more intense, and further removed from reality. They'll start rewriting the past with total confidence, twisting timelines, denying things that clearly just happened, and blaming you for things you never even did or said. The whole point of this heightened gaslighting is to shake your grip on what's real, to push you into arguing back, defending yourself, or even just letting out a frustrated sigh. Anything that shows you're still emotionally plugged into them. Along with these twisted stories, you'll also notice a wave of unpredictable testing behavior, all aimed at poking holes in your silence. You might get random texts late at night, some acting completely casual, like nothing ever happened, others claiming a sudden crisis, an illness, an emergency, anything to pull you back in. These messages are never really about connection. They're bait, thrown out into the dark just to see if you'll take it. They're testing to see if there are any cracks in your resolve, watching to see if guilt, worry, or panic will make you break your silence and respond. If you react with anger, they'll use it to paint you as the unstable one. If you react with kindness, they'll use that to reel you right back into the cycle. Every move in this stage is a calculated pressure test, meant to find that one weak spot in your armor so they can pull you back into a dynamic where they can once again drain the emotional fuel their fragile ego depends on. When all that testing and those manufactured emergencies fail to get even a hint of a reaction from you, the narcissist slips into a state of intense, unstable frustration. Since their whole sense of stability depends on your responses, your steady, unshaken boundary completely cuts off their supply. This ongoing loss of control triggers a deep wound to their ego, and the panic they've spent their whole life running from suddenly bursts through the surface. That's when the polished mask of charm, confidence, and superiority breaks apart and raw, uncontrolled anger takes its place. This isn't a calm response to something happening in the moment. It's an explosion built from pressure that's been building for a long time, coming from the terrifying realization that their tricks no longer work on you. This anger can show up in two very different ways, depending on the person. In more open displays, it looks like intense outbursts, yelling, broken belongings, harsh words meant to scare you, and confrontations meant to force you back into submission through pure fear. They want to provoke a reaction from you because, in their mind, negative attention still beats no attention at all. In quieter, more hidden displays, the anger turns cold and sharp, showing up as freezing, silent treatment. Small acts of sabotage, withholding things you need or affection you deserve, and sharp, passive aggression. Whether it's loud or icy, the motive behind it is the same. They're trying to punish you for not giving in, hoping to wear down your nerves until you finally hand them the reaction they've been craving. Their fury has nothing to do with love or concern for the relationship. It comes from the fact that your silence has revealed just how powerless they really are, stripping away the illusion that they were ever truly in control. When rage, testing, and manipulation all fail to break through your silence, the narcissist makes a sudden, dramatic switch, moving into what's known as the hoovering phase. This isn't coming from real regret, genuine growth, or a sudden burst of empathy. It's a desperate rescue attempt meant purely to stop their fragile ego from completely falling apart. Cut off from the emotional fuel you used to give them, they feel an emptiness so unbearable that they're willing to swallow their pride, twist their own history, and play whatever role it takes to pull you back into their world. During this stage, the change in them can feel shocking and confusing. The same person who was screaming at you or freezing you out with silence just days earlier suddenly turns into the most loving, sentimental, and sorry version of themselves you've ever seen. They'll flood you with messages, bringing up your fondest shared memories, crying in public, and admitting to things they once denied with pure fury. They might make huge promises about changing their whole life, going to couples counseling, or turning over a new leaf, validating pain they never once acknowledged while you were still together. This whole performance is vulnerability used as a weapon. It copies real accountability so well that it can easily stir up your deepest empathy and nostalgia, making you wonder if walking away was actually your mistake. But underneath all that theatrical regret is a cold, calculated motive. They're simply throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, using flattery, guilt, or fake sentimentality to figure out which emotional button still works on you. If you fall for the apology and break your silence, the whole illusion collapses instantly. The second you're back under their influence, the mask comes off. All those promises vanish, and the abuse cycle starts right back up, often worse than before, because you made them beg for it. If you've ever had to survive the exhausting aftermath of dealing with toxic behavior, remember this. Your peace is worth every uncomfortable moment of watching them fall apart. Drop a comment with the word boundary if you're choosing your peace today, and make sure to subscribe so we can keep exploring these dynamics together. Once every attempt at hoovering, manipulation, and staged romance finally slams into the solid wall of your silence, the narcissist shifts from desperation to calculated revenge. Realizing that their charm no longer works on you and that they can't pull any positive supply from you anymore, their whole goal flips overnight from winning you back to tearing down your reputation. This is where the smear campaign begins, a deliberate, harmful mission built to protect their fragile public image by destroying yours. Since their entire sense of self depends on how others see them, they simply can't accept that you left. So they rewrite the story, casting themselves as the innocent victim of your supposed cruelty, instability, or spite. To pull this off, they use mutual friends, family, co-workers, and even strangers, turning your shared social circles into an army of messengers spreading their version of events. They build a narrative that shifts their own toxic behavior, lies, and emotional abuse entirely onto you, mixing half-truths, exaggerated complaints, and flat-out lies. If you ever reacted like a normal human being to their mistreatment, crying, getting upset, or pulling back, they'll take those moments completely out of context to make you look unstable, toxic, or abusive. They move through their social world with a kind of desperate urgency, chasing sympathy and validation to patch up the huge crack your rejection left in their ego. This stage can feel incredibly confusing and painfully unfair because it means watching someone who hurt you deeply suddenly play the innocent victim. You might notice mutual friends drifting away, giving you strange looks or repeating twisted versions of events that never even happened. The narcissist treats this manufactured outrage as a backup source of supply. Every person who takes their side, believes their story, or gets angry on their behalf becomes another patch over their broken ego. They need that chorus of support to drown out the terrifying truth that they've lost control over you. Understanding how the smear campaign works matters because it protects your peace. It reminds you that none of it is really about who you are. It's entirely about their frantic need to control the story before people find out what's really hiding behind their mask. Once the public drama of the smear campaign dies down and the rush of revenge fades, the narcissist is finally left alone behind closed doors with no distractions, no messengers, and no audience left. This is where the real, terrifying collapse happens internally, dropping them into a deep pit of panic and psychological breakdown. Despite all their grandiosity, control tactics, and blame shifting, their entire existence rests on a fragile, empty base that can't survive without constant outside approval. With your silence holding strong, their supply is completely cut off, leaving them trapped in an echo chamber filled with their own deep sense of inadequacy, shame, and self-hatred. Unlike someone securely attached, who might work through a breakup with healthy grief, reflection, and eventual peace, a narcissist simply cannot process the loss of a real human connection. They don't grieve losing you as a partner, friend, or individual person. Instead, they panic over losing something they used, the mirror that constantly reflected back a perfect, inflated version of themselves. Without that mirror, they're forced to stare straight into the terrifying emptiness inside them. The defenses that usually protect them from feeling small, unlovable, or broken start to fall apart under the weight of that emptiness. In this dark place, they might spiral into a serious depressive episode marked by exhaustion, sharp irritability, a constant feeling of being wronged, and a real struggle to manage their emotions. Because they can't handle accountability or self-reflection, they don't experience this pain as something to work through. They experience it as an injury that you caused. They feel trapped by their own unresolved issues, yet they're completely unable to look inward and actually fix anything. This inner panic is exactly why they move so fast to find a replacement. The emptiness is so unbearable, and the fear of facing their true self is so intense that they'll grab onto any lifeline or any unsuspecting new person just to escape the silence inside their own head. When that inner emptiness and the terror of facing themselves become too much to bear, the narcissist reaches the final stage of collapse, where they take one of two clear escape routes. Since they're simply not built for real self-reflection, accountability, or sitting with discomfort, they can't actually heal from the wound your silence caused. Instead, they need an outside solution, fast, to save their fragile ego from falling apart completely. This shows up in one of two ways, both coming from the same survival instinct. The first and most common path is quickly grabbing onto a new source of supply. With shocking speed and what looks like a total lack of real emotion, they latch onto a fresh target, a new partner, an agreeable coworker, or someone from their past who's always been willing to enable them, and they project all their idealized fantasies onto this new person. From the outside, it looks like they've moved on without a second thought, skipping happily into a new chapter and leaving the wreckage behind them. But in truth, this new relationship isn't built on real affection or connection. It's a desperate emergency measure. They're using this new person as a shield to block out the painful reminders of their collapse, forcing them to play mirror and prop up a false self that keeps cracking at the edges. The other path, less common, happens when they can't quickly find a replacement or when the wound from your boundary is too deep to patch up right away. In these cases, they might choose to disappear completely, retreating into the shadows while holding onto a deep, lasting resentment. They'll avoid you entirely, block you everywhere, and act like you never existed. Not because they found peace, but because just knowing you're out there is a constant, humiliating reminder that they lost. Whether they run straight into a new relationship or vanish into bitter isolation, their goal stays exactly the same: to get as far away as possible from the truth that you saw through them, refused to feed their dysfunction, and left them standing alone in the wreckage they created. Walking through these 7 stages of narcissistic collapse leads to one clear realization for anyone who's chosen silence. Boundaries aren't just about protecting yourself. They completely disrupt a toxic system. When you stop feeding the cycle of reaction, gaslighting, and manufactured chaos, you take apart the entire power dynamic. Along the way, you see just how fragile that false self really is, watching them move from confusion to frantic testing to explosive anger to manipulative hoovering to vicious smear campaigns, and finally to the internal panic that pushes them toward either a desperate replacement or complete isolation. Understanding this pattern matters because it shifts you from being emotionally tangled up in it to seeing it clearly from the outside. You realize their chaotic reactions, their smear campaigns, and their frantic attempts to regain control were never about your worth. They were always a direct result of their own inner emptiness. Their inability to sit with themselves, to genuinely take responsibility, or to process real grief keeps them stuck in an endless loop of dysfunction, always chasing outside approval that can never actually fill that hole inside them. Choosing your silence is the ultimate way of reclaiming your peace, your nervous system, and your life. It takes real strength to get through the testing, the smear campaigns, and the theatrical hoovering without giving in. But standing strong through all of it gives you something priceless: freedom. You step out of the exhausting cycle of manipulation and into a space where you're fully in control of your own emotions, where your energy can't be hijacked by someone else's need to survive psychologically. By refusing to engage, you break the cycle for good, proving that the greatest power you have against toxicity is simply the choice to walk away and never look back. Leaving a toxic relationship behind is never easy, but your silence is the true force that brings down that fragile house of cards. When you stop feeding the cycle of reaction, you cut off the fuel that keeps their illusion alive. From that first shock and frantic testing, through the explosive rage, the calculated hoovering, the vicious smear campaigns, all the way to the internal panic that pushes them toward a replacement or into hiding, every stage of this collapse points to one truth: their chaos was never about you. It was always about the emptiness they couldn't escape. Holding your boundaries takes real courage, especially when you're faced with dramatic attempts to pull you back in or twist the truth. But on the other side of that hard moment is complete freedom. You walk away from the exhausting cycle of manipulation and take back your peace, your nervous system, and your sense of self. By choosing silence, you prove that the strongest response to toxicity isn't a fight. It's the calm, unshakable choice to walk away and never turn back.